It was 10:30 p.m. in East Rutherford, New Jersey, April 23, 1993. Most of the 20,000 people inside the Brendan Byrne Arena were just waiting for the final buzzer so they could beat the traffic. But Shaquille O'Neal wasn't done. He was never done. Shaq catches it in the post. He turns, he explodes, and then the world stops. That wasn't a highlight. It was a structural failure. The hoop didn't just break, it gave up. It folded like a lawn chair because it wasn't built for a 300-pound anomaly who played basketball like he was trying to punch a hole through the earth. People remember the glass shattering, sure, but this was different. This was the support system itself screaming for mercy. This was the NBA realizing in real time that their equipment was obsolete. Welcome to Hooponic. Today, we're digging into the decade where the NBA didn't just change, it had to be rebuilt from the ground up to survive the diesel. We're looking at the most terrifying athlete to ever lace 'em up.
In 1992, the NBA was Michael Jordan's world. It was a league of grace, of air, of perimeter highlights. Centers were supposed to be anchors, sure, but the era of the unstoppable giant felt like a relic of the Wilt Chamberlain days. David Robinson was fast, Patrick Ewing was tough, and Hakeem Olajuwon was a dream, but none of them felt like a natural disaster. Then Shaq showed up. He wasn't just big, he was 7'1" and 303 pounds of twitch fiber muscle. Before the draft, some analysts actually wondered if he had the agility for the pro game. Imagine that. They were worried the guy who would go on to break the sport was too clunky. But there was a chip on his shoulder that people didn't see coming. Shaq had a specific motivation for that New Jersey rim racking. Earlier in the season, Derek Coleman had dunked on Shaq and wagged a finger in his face. Shaq didn't just want to win the game, he wanted to destroy the environment where the game took place. He wanted to make sure Coleman knew that if he played with fire, the whole house was coming down. His rookie year wasn't a transition, it was a destruction tour. Phoenix, February 7th, Shaq dunks and the entire stanchion collapses like an accordion. The game stops for 37 minutes. Why? Because the NBA didn't have a backup. Rod Thorne and the league office were in literal shock. They had to invent a Shaq rule on the spot, forcing every team to keep a spare $15,000 basket support on site, just in case the kid from LSU decided to end a game early.
Think about the logistics of that. The NBA had to change its manufacturing standards. They moved to breakaway rims that could flex, and they replaced the glass-to-stanchion connections with a direct mount steel system. They literally had to Shaq-proof the planet. But the league's problems were just beginning. While they were strengthening the steel, Shaq was busy strengthening the meat. Look at the weight gain. This wasn't just a guy getting out of shape. This was a guy weaponizing mass. By the time he's winning 3 straight titles in LA, he's not 300 pounds anymore. He's 345 in his MVP year. He's 385 in 2001. By the 2002 finals, he later admitted he was a staggering 415 pounds. He was the heaviest player in the history of the sport, and yet he was still the most athletic guy on the floor. He could run the break, spin in the post with the footwork of a ballerina, and then finish with enough force to register on a seismograph. It was unfair. It was a glitch in the matrix. This is where the cynicism sets in. You have a guy who is effectively a human bulldozer. What do? If you're the NBA, you change the rules. Again, you don't just change the hoops, you change the way the game is allowed to be played. In 2001, the league reached a breaking point. Shaq was too efficient. He was too dominant in isolation. Under the old illegal defense rules, teams had to play man-to-man. You couldn't pre-rotate. You couldn't camp a second guy in the paint. You had to let your center get mauled in a one-on-one matchup. The result? Shaq was shooting 60% from the floor and living at the free throw line. He was making the best defenders in the world look like middle schoolers. So the Board of Governors nuked the rulebook. They legalized zone defense for the first time in the modern era. Shaq hated it.
He called it stinking and said a grown man doesn't need to play zone. But the league knew they had to let teams build a literal human wall, or Shaq was going to finish every game with 60 and 20. They also introduced the defensive 3 seconds rule. Why? To keep guys from just standing under the rim, sure, but also to force Shaq to move, to make him work, to give the rest of the world a fighting chance. And yet, even with the rules stacked against him, the terror remained. March 6, 2000, Shaq's 28th birthday. The Clippers, being the Clippers, refused to give Shaq extra tickets for his family on his birthday. That is a top-tier mistake. Shaq didn't just beat them, he punished them. He played 45 minutes, dropped 61 points, and grabbed 23 rebounds. He had 11 dunks in a single game. Imagine being a professional athlete, a 7-footer yourself, and having a guy dunk on your head 11 times in 2 hours. That's the BBQ chicken mentality. It's the absolute dismissive confidence that no one could handle him. When the Lakers played the Nets in the 2002 finals, the mismatch was so bad it felt like a crime. Todd McCulloch was a solid pro, but against 415-pound Shaq, he was a speed bump. Shaq called that series boring. He was bored by the finals. Think about that.
To really understand why Shaq was terrifying, we have to look at the Wilt comparison. Everyone loves to compare the two. Wilt was a track star in a giant's body. He was faster, he could jump higher. But Shaq had something Wilt didn't. He had the weight. At his peak, Shaq weighed nearly 100 pounds more than Wilt ever did. Wilt was a fencer. Shaq was a wrecking ball. When Shaq hit you in the post, it wasn't a basketball play, it was a car crash. He used his lower body like a hydraulic press. He'd back you down 1, 2, 3 steps, and by the time you realized you were under the rim, it was too late. The league even had to tolerate Hack-a-Shaq. It was an ugly, desperate strategy that turned games into a slog. Don Nelson and Greg Popovich realized the only way to stop him was to refuse to let him play basketball. They turned the game into a math problem. If he shoots 50% from the line, that's better than the 75% he'll shoot if he gets to the rim. It was a testament to his fear factor. Coaches were willing to make their own teams look terrible just to keep Shaq from touching the ball. Theo Ratliff once described watching Shaq play Dikembe Mutombo, one of the greatest defenders ever, and said Mutombo looked like a crash test dummy. That is the legacy. It's not just the 4 rings or the MVP. It's the broken equipment. It's the rewritten rule book. It's the psychological scars left on an entire generation of centers who were forced to spend their careers being the secondary character in a Shaq highlight reel.
Shaq didn't just play basketball. He broke the very concept of it. He broke the rims, he broke the defensive philosophy of the 20th century, he broke the spirits of men who spent their whole lives being the biggest guy in the room until they met the diesel. Today, the NBA is a league of spacing and threes. It's a small ball world, but the rims are still Shaq-proof. The zone defense is still legal. The defensive 3-second rule is still there. Shaq isn't on the court anymore, but his fingerprints and his dents are everywhere. He wasn't just a star, he was a structural shock. He was the most terrifying athlete in the history of the game. And honestly, we'll never see anything like it again. The league simply wouldn't allow it.